Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess. And we have reached episode 81. Presently, for the next 13 minutes, it is March 31st. The last episode was March 7th. One before that, February 21st. So, needless to say, the new 2-week cadence has slowed things down a bit beyond a 2-week cadence. And to me, that's okay, but we got to get caught up. The creative process, as I've said many times before, is not something that will be told what to do. And I haven't tried to dictate things. I've just tried to feel it out. You know, art is a lot about feeling and emotion. And, it's been a dark couple of months for, a handful of reasons. And I think it's natural. Like, I want to be a little transparent right now because I think it's natural to go through life to kind of know what you want at this moment, know what you wanted before, maybe understand what you might want in the future. And we're just like constantly weaving a thread with those three strings. And sometimes what you wanted before doesn't quite work out. What you want right now, maybe you're not so sure. What looks ahead, or like looking ahead, future doesn't look, maybe the way you thought, or it's just unclear, or you see something ahead that you're not looking forward to. And a combination of those three things, sometimes if all three of those threads seem pretty negative at a given point in time when you're weaving that thread, you can just get really, I think bogged down is the best way to describe it. And I don't think it's a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you allow it to cause you to make bad decisions, to self-destruct, and to lose hope ultimately. Like, you gotta find a way to wrap your mind around what's happened, be okay with where you're at now, and find a way to be hopeful about the future, to be excited about what's coming. And it could take a perspective shift. I think maybe sometimes people do a little too much in terms of kind of editing reality toward their sanity. I think we have to take reality as it is, but find those silver linings, find the path, the golden path, the thread through the middle, and weave your three strings around that path. And that's just a little clarity after me having had all three threads really kind of go sour for a little bit. And I think before, when that would happen, I would kind of maybe unwind into chaos. And as I get older, as I get a little bit more solid in who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing on this earth, I think maybe that helps ground me a little bit. And even when it gets dark that way, you kind of just ride it out and keep weaving, keep trying to make it right. Because eventually you'll do the right thing and you'll get back on the path. This is me hopping back on the path. Not that I ever got off it, but I was just, I think my brakes were a little bit stuck for a little bit. I wasn't quite going full tilt. Although I still had the intention to make art kind of in my heart, it just wasn't, it wasn't flowing with ease. And now I can say, over the past couple weeks, it feels like that brake that was locked has been slowly released a little bit, and it's gonna, I think, continue to release, hopefully. Don't want to go too fast or fly too high like Icarus, but yeah, just hit cruising altitude and keep on keeping on. So anyways, that's my start to this episode. Now, with that, I think the clogged creativity has come forth in a very somewhat, it's like hard to it's hard to call it something other than explosive. There's an explosion of creativity. I was thinking about what I want the next series of 7 episodes to be, because I kind of decided this one and this one's like not going too well, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna finish this out. I know what I have to do, and I'm just gonna keep consuming content and be inspired. And then then what? And maybe thinking about what's next will kind of jog these last 3 episodes of this series. And I think in a way it did. Partially, I guess I can get into it. But I've been thinking a little bit about just like our society, I guess, and just feeling that, like, of the people I know, what kind of like separates them. And I think there's like generations, and they say generations maybe every like 10 years or so, but I think you could even shorten it down to like 7. And I always go back to something I visited a long time ago on the podcast, was science at one point or another. I don't know how true this actually is. It said that our cells turn over every 7 years. So technically every 7 years you have a new body. And that gave me a little bit of inspiration because late last year I did turn 35. So at this point I have, every 7 years I kind of got 5 epochs. And if I just flip that, then I have 7 episodes, and each episode's going to be about 5 years of my life, and just talking about looking back, maybe the theme of those eras, and then I guess what I experience in each of those eras, and like what I see in people, because like right now I'm in school with a lot of folks who are aged 20 to 25, and that was a very specific era for me. If I had been in chiropractic school in that era, don't think I would have been successful. So it's a good thing I didn't go then. It's a good thing I was held back, so to speak. But it is interesting. It's an interesting thought experiment. And partially too, so the final episode of this series, 2 episodes from now, which I'm going to push myself. So I'm going to release this one tomorrow on April Fool's Day. I got, next episode is about Caesar, Julius Caesar. I'm going to push to release that on Friday. And last but not least, I'm going to release the 3rd episode of the end of this series. The penultimate, I think. Is that penultimate? Anyways, episode on Sunday. And the focus of our last show really made me think about, who I am at my age and what does it all mean. So yeah, it's been a process. I think through the Malcolm X episode, before this one, I got into Islam a little bit. I didn't really realize, I took a class at Harvard about the Torah and the Christian Bible, and we studied some comparative religion, but mostly it was about the Torah, and we had a rabbi teach us about it, and then we had a a Christian, clergyman come in and teach us about the Bible, kind of the rest of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that was interesting, but after the New Testament comes the Quran. I didn't realize that was kind of a time period after. And it talks about Jesus. It talks about all the characters from the Bible and the same, same kind of stories. But some of the stories are missing. And opinions about the Israelites and the Gentiles and the Hebrews and all the different, classes of people. It's just a little bit different, and I think it's interesting, and I could see why the middle ground of the Quran could be taken and maybe polarized to an extreme side, because I think Christians and Jewish folk have over time polarized the other direction. But really all three of these texts are, somewhat moderate. It's our kind of interpretation of them, I think, that gets skewed and maybe radicalized, pushed to the margins, because people want to be seen and heard, and that's really the only way to do it, is to be crazy and wave your arms and scream, "Look at me!" And I think a lot of people get caught up in emotions, kind of like I had, like I just described at the beginning of this episode, and allow themselves to be pulled to those margins. But you have to be strong and hold two truths at once. So that brings us, I think that kind of sets the stage. So again, maybe one more sentence setting the stage here. So we have JFK, Gandhi, Martin Luther King. Those three kind of set the foundation here. All were assassinated. All tried to lead people toward freedom, toward greater freedom. Malcolm X was a great example of someone who is a great man of character, similar to the others I just mentioned. But early on, he was infected with hatred. As a young man, his family was attacked by the Ku Klux Klan. His dad was killed by the Klan. And so a man of his character to ultimately, by the end of his life, metabolize that hatred and become the Malcolm X outside of the Nation of Islam that, ended up going to aid Martin Luther King. One time when he was in jail, he gave a sermon for him. And, kind of kept his radical persona to push people toward Martin as a moderate solution. But he did it to help Martin. At the end of the day, he ended up reconciling even with him, and was assassinated before he could fully flush out that new version of him. So I thought that was beautiful, and why I looked into Islam. So now we got to go up the chain. And again, next episode will be about Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire a little bit. But this episode is about Abraham Lincoln. I wanted to watch the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis. And I have it on DVD. It's not here with me in Dallas. It's back in Ohio in storage. But I found an alternative. I still plan on watching it over this next break. I do have a good amount of time at home back in Ohio. I'll be there for a week, so I'll be able to grab Lincoln and give it a watch. But instead, I watched this History Channel documentary about the man. And fascinating. And what I was talking about with Islam and the Bible and the Torah and all that is the ability to hold two truths, not as a pure dichotomy, not as one's right and one's wrong, The ability to hold two truths as truthful as we can be, as we can know. Like, we can't truly know everything. There's some things that we know pretty well, but even, the truest core truth, for example, life on Earth is stable. Well, an asteroid comes and hits the Earth. It's not stable anymore. And that would be kind of the most devastating thing to mankind. So, life is fragile and truth is fragile. We know things to be true for right now, but those things can always change. And you have to be willing to forge ahead as best as we can and accept the fact that this is the best we can do right now. And then really hold yourself accountable to, like, is this actually the best we can do? I think it's really hard to do, but it's the key to genuinely succeeding in life. It is just evolution and adaptation. Find the truth, strong opinions, loosely held, and knowing that some of those opinions are going to have to be held at the same time. And the true sign of intelligence is being able to understand that two things can be true at once. And I bring that up about Lincoln. It's the first thing I'm going to talk about with him, is the fact that he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And we talked about Martin Luther King and JFK, how Gandhi sought to get rights for Indian folks in South Africa and in India and in the UK and the empire at large. And then MLK and John F. Kennedy used his tactics, especially Martin Luther King, to push civil rights. And Lincoln was really the beginning of this. So Emancipation Proclamation made it possible for a lot of slaves to become free, to emancipate themselves. And it wasn't until Martin Luther King and JFK really got to work that they finally got all of their freedom. And even after that, there was Jim Crow laws, and even, today there's voter suppression and things. It's never truly, truly free. Again, like, it's not that African Americans are either 100% free or 0% free. It's, how free are you? It takes me back to a couple years ago. Kanye West said that slavery is a choice. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of, like, Kanye obviously is a very genius artist, but I think he's struggling with this concept of holding two truths at once. So just saying slavery is a choice is not, it doesn't quite paint the whole picture. So yes, slavery, like being put into slavery and then waking up every day and doing the work that you're told to do, is absolutely a choice. The alternative choice was to run away and basically just always be on the run, never be able to relax, separated from your family. Family's going to be punished for you leaving. It's just like really dire. Like slavery is a choice, but the other option wasn't really an option at all. Until Abraham Lincoln gave the option, the Emancipation Proclamation. It said, come to the North, emancipate yourself. And even at that point, you can turn around and say, okay, so they're free now, like 100%. Well, no. Like, a lot of times they emancipated themselves. Their families, if they were lucky enough to bring them with them, likely got to, stay. likely impoverished in the North. And oftentimes the men of fighting age had to enlist in the Civil War. And so they went to fight, and the Civil War was highly dangerous. Many thousands of lives were lost. So they died. So are they really free? You know, like, we emancipate yourself to go get killed in a war. Like, there's just, no matter who you are in life, like, there's things that are required of you. Like, if you're going to take up space on this earth, you're going to breathe the oxygen, you're going to eat the food. Like, there's just some work that you're going to have to do. You know, at the very least, you're going to have to go find a bush with berries on it and eat the berries. So I think, to bring it back to Lincoln, you know, he took an impossible choice and he made it a possible one. And for that time and place, for a white man who really didn't have anything to personally benefit from, you know, to do this. You know, like, he just did it because he knew it was the right thing to do. He knew it was going to be best for humanity, for the United States, and if the United States were to succeed, it'd be best for the world. And he believed deeply in his cause. And there were people like Frederick Douglass, who was an emancipated slave himself, who fought for freedom and thought that Lincoln wasn't doing enough. But I would argue just the sheer fact that in that time where slavery was of such importance to the economy, like, being willing to risk half the country just splitting itself off and rebelling. And, like, you think about rebels, you think about the empire, and the rebels are seceding from something evil, and they're messing with, you know, an evil cause. And then to the South, the North was evil for taking away their economic support. But ultimately, in this case, you know, I think the North was justified in ending slavery, and there were several European countries that had already done so and kind of outlawed it, and kind of were in agreement. Like, this was happening in the world. Like, it was just time. And Lincoln was just, you know, courageous enough to see his part through. And so I think it's natural for Frederick Douglass to be underwhelmed, maybe. I guess maybe the right term, you know. But and Frederick Douglass almost has to play his part, you know. Like, he can't be satisfied until it's 100% freedom. And also, he has to know that it's never going to be 100% freedom, and nobody is ever that free. I'll get to that a little bit later. But just the way this documentary portrayed it, I mean, it was just a masterful. For this to take place all within a span of like a decade. You know, at a time where, you know, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have like cars and planes the way we do now. I mean, the momentum. Nowadays, like, everything happens so lightning fast. To say like all this happened slowly is kind of a natural reaction. But I was like thinking about, I was like, man, back then, like, there was no speed, and he just like ramrodded this thing through. I mean, it was absolutely incredible to me. And again, like, he didn't go all the way with it. He just went as far as he felt like he could go. And in the end, maybe it was a little bit too far, because he ended up losing his life over it. But I'd argue it was all necessary. And he probably knew that was a possible outcome. So I think he made his choice, and I think at the end of the day, his soul can rest. knowing what he did, and especially if there is an afterlife and you can see what's happening on earth now, the work still isn't over. But what he did to kind of unlodge this, he basically cut out a giant tumor, and the tumor has been trying to regrow ever since. But he just cut it, pulled it out kind of root and stem, and just made a massive amount of progress in a very short amount of time. And then obviously the progress slowed, but I'd argue it also didn't get worse. So just absolutely fantastic. And the amount that he had to hold it true in his brain that slavery is wrong and everyone should be 100% free. And also knowing that white people in the South were just not gonna, you're doing it at a great cost to a group of people who should pay the price. But ultimately, they're still human. They're still there. They still need to earn their keep. Their economy needs to flow. So it had to be like a kind of a clever solution, or it had to be a forceful one. And I think he tried to go the clever route. That was shut down very quickly. It's almost like the clever route would have taken even longer. So, if there's a divine kind of hand in all this, I think the Civil War, as awful as it was in terms of loss of life and just circumstances, I think it was the only way this kind of change could be made that quickly. Sometimes it's just necessary. And yeah, that's it's just absolutely incredible, the ability to hold the interest of Southern whites and slaves at the same time and do the right thing at the correct pace, as gently as it could be done. The gentleness of a compromise is dictated by the person least willing. If someone's going to resist, well, now there's friction. And you can go into it not wanting friction, but if the other person wants friction, there's going to be friction. And all you can do is, wage that war. And I think he always waged a war with the idea that, if the South needed an escape hatch, he was going to give it to him. He was going to say, hey, all right, unconditional surrender on these terms, but you're back in the Union and we need you. And he's always willing to come to the table. And it was really the South that dictated how bad it got at the end. And I only know that because even Lincoln's own generals didn't really want to fight. But anyways, so I've mentioned two things I want to keep going on. One is the divine hand in the conflict, and the other is kind of that little bit on slavery being a choice and how none of us are really 100% free. Even though we're not slaves by name, we fall in debt and servitude to a great many things, sometimes by our choice and sometimes not. So first and foremost, I'll get to the divine hand, divine will. This was something that struck me and that I didn't know about before, and I had studied poli-sci at Harvard. So this hit me pretty hard. And I guess I did study the American Revolution. I didn't really study Civil War as much. Like, it wasn't really American history. It was like British history, and then like the last bit where they like lose the colonies, and then a lot about China, because I'm just random like that, I guess, and didn't want to write a thesis. I had a really funny conversation with a guy that also went to Harvard that got out of writing a thesis, and some of my best work in terms of bullshittery. So that's for another day. But yeah, this hit me pretty hard, kind of right at my core. And we're already at 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to just read this and let it speak for itself. But it's called Meditation on the Divine Will. And it's like, as Lincoln's getting through the war, this is September 1862. I believe it ended in 65. So roughly halfway into it, and really not knowing. I think he went into this knowing the cause was just, not knowing what it was going to cost. Yeah. So anyways, this website, abrahamlincolnonline.org, is Speeches and Writings of Abraham Lincoln. You can go on there and find this Meditation on the Divine Will. And the author of this website put, this fragment was found and preserved by John Hay, one of President Lincoln's White House secretaries, who said it was not written to be seen of men. Some of the thoughts expressed here, written after discouraging days of personal sorrow and military defeats, also appear in Lincoln's second inaugural address of 1865. Hay said that in this writing, Mr. Lincoln admits us into the most secret recesses of his soul. Perplexed and afflicted beyond the power of human help by the disasters of war, the wrangling of parties, and the inexorable constraining logic of his own mind, he shut out the world one day and tried to put into form his double sense of responsibility to human duty and divine power. And this was the result. It shows, as has been said in another place, the awful sincerity of a perfectly honest soul, trying to bring itself into closer communion with its maker. So, Washington, D.C., September 1862. The will of God prevails. In great contest, each party claims to act in accordance with the will of God. Both may be, and one must be, wrong. God cannot be for and against the same thing at the same time. In the present civil war, it is quite possible that God's purpose is something different from the purpose of either party. And yet the human instrumentalities, working just as they do, are of the best adaptation to effect his purpose. I'm almost ready to say that this is probably true, that God wills this contest, and wills that it shall not end yet. By his mere great power on the minds of now contestants, he could have either saved or destroyed the Union without a human contest. Yet the contest began. And having begun, he could give the final victory to either side any day. Yet the contest proceeds. So when this came up in the documentary, they kind of read this little bit out loud, it struck me. I think it hit me at a time when I myself had engaged in a struggle, a bit of a civil war myself, in a personal relationship. And just watching him as he navigated the Civil War, I just couldn't help but feel like this is super true. And maybe just like honestly the core of human nature. I mean, we're all a part of one humankind, but we're also just one soul, amongst all the souls that live on earth. And those are two very hard truths to reconcile. At the end of the day, you want what's best for yourself, and there's also something that's best for mankind. And the ideal thing, as I found in my career in chiropractic, that's coming very, very soon. I think it's ultimately what's good for my community, and also what's good for me. It's good for me to serve, to earn a living, do it in a way that I'm proud of, and again, serving the community, helping people manage their health and live more fuller lives, be more free than they otherwise would have been. That's something that I think about a lot. It's really at the core of my purpose. So I think that's the best case scenario, kind of like a win-win. And I think in human relationships, I personally am always seeking a win-win. If I want something and I think it's going to be good for myself and the other person or the other people, I go after it with absolute reckless abandon. I mean, the LLC I have for, different like businesses I've done, coaching and things like that in Texas is called Unguarded Pursuit LLC. Like, when I see a win-win, I go after it. And I have a very peculiar mind. I'm very honest with myself about what I want, and I'm very honest with others about what I think's best. And I don't expect people to agree with me. And sometimes with humans, though, they won't necessarily tell you. They aren't as honest. I mean, this episode is about Honest Abe, after all. And I think it's easy to get angry and, be upset about someone not being honest, but I always get back to good old Hanlon's razor. Don't attribute to malice what is done in ignorance. It could be that someone's confused. They don't really know what they want. They don't have enough information. They're afraid to make a choice. Their opinion changes on the day. 80% of the time it's a yes, and the other 20% of the time they're so fucking scared that it's a no. And I think in the past I've always tried to maybe manipulate people, and maybe I know for certain I haven't always known what's best, but whatever I had currently thought was best, I thought was prudent to pursue. And instead of telling the truth and allowing the person to choose or waffle or whatever option, yes, no, maybe, I don't know, I'm fucking scared, there's more than just two answers. And sometimes people don't say them plainly. Sometimes they say yes and they mean I'm fucking scared. And sometimes they say no and they mean I'm fucking scared. And sometimes I think not saying the exact way you feel and not being sure about it is almost 100%. Like, it's got to be above 90% for people, because we just don't have enough information. We don't know. And you can't know. Like I was saying, you have to be able to hold two truths that are equally unreliable and just go with something. And I think as I've come to understand that, I think I used to try to manipulate people into buying into my win-win. that I was so sure about. And I don't know what percentage rate I was right about a win-win, and that was the optimal outcome. I'd like to think more than 50%, but maybe not much more. The times I was wrong, then I'm manipulating someone into doing something wrong. And, I will resolve to do better. And I've learned a lot from those cases. And I've learned the biggest lesson is that you got to just say the honest to God truth as you know it in that moment, and just let it breathe. And let the person do whatever they're going to do. And if anything, now I've just coached people into, hey, if this is a yes, like in your bones, then you have to tell me yes, and we have to do everything we can to do this right now. And if it's not a yes in your bones, like, you need to figure it out. Like, you need to either get yourself to that place and let me know how I can help you, or you have to just tell me that you don't agree. And that's okay. Like, there's consequences to that. Which is that I'm going to seek somewhere where I can find a win-win. But that's better than the waffling or the I don't know or the being scared. And I, for me personally, the biggest antidote I find is to just going with your gut, going with your heart, and really just saying, what your body is telling you. I think Lincoln was probably scared to death, and people were like messing with his carriages, and his wife got like hit her head and got like concussed, and all this like drama was happening while he was literally trying to win the Civil War, and it's like the worst war in, definitely in like American history at that point, in terms of just body count. And like, he had to be scared to death, but he just believed, like, you can see in this passage on divine will, like, he just felt God was working through him, and he had to see this thing through. And ultimately, now that we know the results, like, he was absolutely justified, in my opinion, because he set forth a great amount of change that led to, a lot of the freedoms on paper that we have now. Which brings me to my last point. It's a bit of a long episode, but I had a lot to say, I guess, after a couple weeks off. We're going to wrap it up, put a bow on it with this. We talk about freedom, and watching the documentary, watching Frederick Douglass, watching Abe Lincoln, watching Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, all these people, they're all just fighting for what they think is right. And that's freedom. And I think human nature, the ugliness of humanity, has a way of rearing its head in new and more insidious ways. Like, we defeat the forces of evil as a race. We come together and we do something like the Civil War, which is a great evil that then led to a growing union and eventually the country we have today. And again, all the freedoms on paper that people now have that are guaranteed by a legal document. And then you have what I call the fuckery. So, as blessed as African Americans are to no longer, have the choices that Kanye West was talking about, slavery or a life on the run and my family being dead or punished severely, that's not a choice. To now, a lot of times they have a choice of like, it's almost like instead of the hatred being out in the open, now it's just moved to the shadows. And now the oppressors aren't all one color. And it's almost like, I mean, back then it seemed kind of simple on the surface. It's like 100% white slave owner, 100% black slave, red versus blue, good versus evil, you name it. Like, it's so simple. And nowadays it's like 70-30, 80-20, 60-40, 50-50, 90-10. Like, is the person you're talking to 90% good? And 10 times you interact with them, are they going to fuck you over once? Or might it be more, for some reason or another? Like, it's just not so simple. And even if you go back to the Civil War, there were great men like Robert E. Lee that fought for the Confederacy. And he was just a soldier. He was a great general. He just happened to be on that side. He happened to have family from the South. Like, you got to choose between country and family, and you choose family. Like, can you really fault him? Like, we can, but also I commend him for protecting his family. And he ultimately failed, and that's even worse. So it's just not so simple. And African Americans are technically free, but there's a lot of stuff that still holds them back. That's almost invisible. And you can feel it. And on paper, they're free. And you can tell them, hey, look, you're free. But they're not free. And I would even argue that, impoverished people are not free. If you have to go to the check casher and give up a certain percentage of your check to get your money a little sooner because your rent's due on a specific schedule, it's just a different form of slavery. And the system's designed for survival of the fittest, and I believe wholeheartedly in survival of the fittest, and I also believe that there are some extremely fit people that get stuck in an awful system and don't make it. And there's an element of luck to it that if we can somehow identify those people and pluck them out of those situations, could we get a solution to a medical problem? Could we get the next president? Could we get a Nobel Prize winner? Like, someone that's going to contribute greatly to society that just got stuck as a black person in current America, or say, somebody whose parents had a lot of debt and they never learned how to earn money, so they had to learn it themselves and didn't earn any real money until it was too late to execute their dreams. You name it. There's all kinds of beautiful things that I feel like aren't happening because of the way that this dark side has crept into the shadows and subtly affected our world. And I just can't help but feel like we're better than that. I know I'm better than that. And I know the times when I fall short and my shadow comes forth, I know I'm better than that. And I'm doing everything I can to hold myself to a higher standard. And I think where the men described in these episodes got in trouble is called by divine will or not, they may be pushed a little, just a hair too hard. And it's not to say you shouldn't do, Lincoln shouldn't have done what he did, because it was obviously necessary. And maybe it was inevitable, but I just can't help but be like, I'm not afraid. If I was in one of their positions, like, I would do everything I could with the knowledge I had, but just pushing your mind to be more intelligent and pushing your heart to be more coherent, and having that intelligence and that coherence, that kind of inner sixth sense intuition to be like sharp as a tack. It's kind of a balance of the masculine and feminine. The more you can balance it, maybe there's a thin sliver where, we don't have to lose our greatest leaders at their peak, and that brings me back around to choices. Kanye says slavery is a choice. Well, the alternate is not a very good choice until the Emancipation Proclamation, until Lincoln gave them a better choice. And right now, I feel like in my life, there's just a lot of disadvantages. So there's a lot of advantages to being me, specifically, because I think I found my career calling and my path. But there's a lot of other things, like, I've come to realize that, like, as I get this new career, like, I would really like to meet someone and start a family, and that, meeting someone kind of happens, now, like, I'm open to it now. And so I'm not in a rush, but, if I did meet someone in the next, like, 2 years or so and went through a really solid foundational, like, dating process and, a good kind of sized engagement, I'm 35 now, and say like 40, 41, 42, maybe even to like 45. Like, I don't have like a specific number, but it just feels like that's what I need to be doing. And also, I just look around at the dating pool, at what other men my age and one slightly older and slightly younger are dealing with in their relationships. And I look around and I just don't know if I feel that optimistic that I'm going to find a person that equally wants to create something sacred and hold it as sacred and keep it that way over years, times, even when it doesn't quite make sense. It's not convenient for either one of us or both of us. And like, then adding kids into the equation and having to deal with that extra chaos, like, I know I'm up for it, and I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic, but I'm also just like, I don't know, feeling the depth of connections I felt before in the past, knowing how deep they were and knowing still how fragile they were, partially because of me and partially because of who I was with. And like, it's like kind of like threading a needle, kind of like winning a civil war and emancipating slaves in just a short amount of time. Like, so it's possible, but it's like it's a freaking miracle, to be honest. Like, that's kind of how it feels, and I'm up for a miracle. But man, yeah, like, you just, there's no present civil war happening. That's, blue coats versus red coats or gray coats out on the battlefield, but I'll be damned if there isn't a civil war. And it happens every day. Even just in subtle interactions with strangers, I can feel all manner of emotions from people. And here I am, kind of the same happy-go-lucky man I've been for most of my life, trying to look for these win-wins and just strangely suffering for it. I think that's what this whole series of episodes has really been about. I kind of thought it was weird to talk about people who've been assassinated, but in a way, like, I'm alive, but I feel like I've been assassinated several hundred times in my life. And much like Lincoln's like, hey, here's some stuff we should do. Let's do it. It's for the best for all of us. I know it sucks for some of us, but we're going to all be better for it, I promise. Just trust me. And I feel like I just felt such a kindred vibe with Lincoln. Even if I'm not right, I'm just looking for a win-win. I could be wrong, and then tell me I'm wrong and prove it to me that it's a win-lose, and I'll be like, shit, we got to keep looking. And I'll try something else. There's so many people out there trying to get one over on people that I think it's easy to assume that every person's trying to get over on you. And, if you don't like something, be honest with yourself, be honest with the other person. If they're a shitty person, I'm sorry. But you're going to be okay. But if they're a good person, you can make some goddamn magic. Like real magic. Like ancient societies talk about magic and alchemy and all these things, and it's just when you get in touch with your feelings and you try to connect with another human being, and it just happens to be that right human being that just has that thing that you need, and you got that thing that they need, just make some fucking magic. And that's what Abraham Lincoln was able to do. I mean, there's nothing short of miraculous, and he was killed for it. And I just don't think we should sacrifice people like that as a race of people. Not even just for me. Like, whatever happens to me happens. I'm going to fight for chiropractic, and I can already feel the resistance there. And I'm not necessarily saying I'm going to get killed over it, but maybe my character will be assassinated. Maybe I'll be attacked for my ideas academically. But I don't care, because I know I'm doing my best. And my best is pretty damn good, I think. And it's only getting better by the day. So, take what you will from this episode. But try to be your best self, and do it for yourself. Do it for your people. Do it for other people you don't know. Do it for reasons that you won't ever benefit from. Plant a tree so that your kid can sit in the shade when you're gone. Because it's just the right thing to do. There's no other way to describe it. And I'll be over here doing it. That's where you can find me. So until next time, we're going to talk about Julius Caesar. But for now, that's all, folks. See you later.